When a little girl stood next to her desk, never sitting down, the school janitor thought she might just be an active child. But when he saw her legs shaking, he realized something was wrong. She was hiding bruises under her baggy clothes. Before we start this emotional story about a janitor who helped a girl failed by the foster care system, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Do you think one person can make a difference in a child's life? Please like this video and subscribe for more stories that show how caring can change someone's life forever. Mr. Wallace had worked at Highland Oaks Elementary for 14 years. He was the kind of janitor most people didn't notice when they walked by in the hallway. Teachers would just nod hello, sometimes calling him sir, if they bothered to speak to him at all. Children hurried past, too busy with their friends or rushing to the bathroom to notice the man pushing a mop and bucket. He liked not being noticed. It let him watch everything without having to make small talk. He once thought to himself that if the school was a stage, he was the backstage crew, important to make everything work well but never taking a bow. Mr. Wallace arrived each morning before anyone else. He unlocked the doors, checked the boiler room, and turned on the hallway lights so they would glow softly as teachers started to arrive. Over the years, he got good at fixing small problems: a broken sink in the art room, a stuck locker near the cafeteria, or a burnt-out light in the science lab. He also knew which teachers came early to prepare their lessons, and which students wandered the halls first, maybe because they felt safer near adults who didn't make them solve math problems or read out loud. He kept mental notes about these kids, the ones who seemed lost or lonely. Though few people knew he paid such close attention, he never bragged about it. He believed his job was to take care of the building. But secretly he had a personal rule: watch carefully, be present, and if he ever felt a child truly needed help, he would do what he could. From the start, Emma caught his eye for one simple reason. The girl wouldn't sit. Ever. Not in the lunchroom, not on the carpet during story time, not even at the small desk assigned to her. She hovered near the edges of the room, hugging the walls as though she wanted to disappear into them. At first glance, it looked like she was just restless. But Mr. Wallace, who had seen many fidgety kids over the years, sensed something else, a quiet tension that spoke of deeper trouble. Emma was small, maybe 8 or 9, with long brown hair that sometimes fell across her face. She wore clothes that seemed either hand-me-downs or simply too big, skirts slightly too long, shirts that hung loosely. She usually had her arms crossed tight over her chest or folded behind her, as though protecting herself from unseen blows. On the rare times Mr. Wallace saw her face directly, he noticed her eyes carried a watchful look, as though she expected to be yelled at or punished at any moment. In Mr. Wallace's earliest memories of her, Emma kept to the corners of the cafeteria. Leaning against a table rather than sitting, she stood behind classmates in line, avoiding eye contact. Whenever a teacher asked Emma to take a seat, the girl would whisper something about getting in trouble if she sat too long. That statement confused Mr. Wallace. Who would punish a child for sitting? Teachers might encourage movement, sure, but it was more common to see them telling an active kid to sit still. Emma's words suggested the opposite, as if there was some rule outside of school about not sitting. Mr. Wallace was curious, but he knew from experience that pushing too hard could scare away a child who was already nervous, so he just watched. At recess, Emma often hovered near the fence, arms wrapped around herself, glancing nervously whenever an adult approached. In the classroom during circle time or story hour, she would stand to the side, shifting her weight from foot to foot. The teacher, Miss Downing, seemed to have grown tired of trying to get her to sit. Mr. Wallace once overheard her mutter to the aide that Emma had been flagged for possible oppositional defiance. "She's so anxious and it comes off as defiance. She refuses to do normal tasks. We just have to document everything," she said. Mr. Wallace thought about that phrase, document everything. He wondered how many notes had been written in Emma's file, and how many professionals had dismissed her tension as just bad behavior. One Monday morning, only a few weeks into the new semester, Mr. Wallace found himself in the hallway outside room 6, where Ms. Downing's class was held. The weekend had left the corridor messy with spilled applesauce and bits of chalk dust from the older kids. He had set up his yellow caution sign and started mopping the sticky patches on the floor. The children trickled in one by one, dropping off coats and backpacks at their cubbies before filing into the classroom. That was when he noticed Emma standing completely still near her cubby, backpack hanging from one shoulder. Her legs seemed to tremble, as though supporting a much larger weight than her small frame. The other kids paid no attention to her, busy chatting or looking for their pencils and notebooks. But Mr. Wallace saw the slight tremor and felt a sudden worry. Carefully, he pushed the mop bucket aside and stepped over to the girl. He made sure his voice was gentle and quiet. "Hey kiddo," he said softly, trying to sound friendly without scaring her. You okay there? Emma's eyes flicked up, but only for a second. She let out a shaky breath. She mumbled something so quiet that Mr. Wallace had to lean in. If I sit too long, Emma whispered, the bruises come back. Mr. Wallace froze, a cold feeling running down his spine. That was not a normal thing for a child to say. Bruises? He opened his mouth to ask more, but before he could, Emma jerked away, grabbing the edge of her cubby shelf. Then she disappeared into the classroom as Ms. Downing called for everyone to gather. Mr. Wallace stood there, mop handle in his grip, feeling alarmed. Something about the girl's tone and the mention of bruises told him this was not just a regular bruise from playing on the playground. That night, in the worn notebook he kept for personal observations, his clipboard log as he called it, Mr. Wallace wrote a note about Emma's behavior. He wrote down the trembling legs, the mention of bruises, and the sense of fear. Over the years he had learned not to trust just his memory. He was not a mandated reporter like teachers and counselors, but he believed in writing down anything that might eventually help a child. The next day he quietly asked the school nurse if she had any records on Emma. She shook her head in a resigned way, saying there had been a concern filed weeks ago about possible neglect, but it was quickly dismissed as behavioral manipulation, according to the foster guardian's statement. The nurse grimaced. This system is so broken, she muttered. We flagged it, but it went nowhere. A name came up in the nurse's brief note. The foster guardian was a woman named Cara Miller, who had taken in Emma after a short stay at a different home. Immediately, Mr. Wallace's suspicion grew deeper. He'd met a few foster parents over the years, good ones and some that seemed less caring. The idea that a child might be stuck with a caretaker who caused or allowed bruises made him feel sick. But he had no direct evidence, just a comment from Emma about bruises and the nurse's note about a dismissed concern. Mr. Wallace decided to keep an even closer watch. 2 days later, Mr. Wallace was cleaning the girls' bathroom during mid-morning. That was usually a quiet time. Classes were in session, and few children asked for hall passes so early unless they were sick. He went about his routine, scrubbing sinks, emptying the trash bin, humming softly to himself. Then he heard a dull thud from one of the stalls. He paused, listening. A muffled sound followed, like a strangled gasp or a whimper. Alarmed, he stepped toward the far stall, noticing a pair of small sneakers visible beneath the door. They were motionless. He knocked gently. Hey, everything okay in there? No response. He pushed on the stall door, which wasn't locked, and found Emma kneeling on the tile floor, arms wrapped around her stomach. The girl's head was bowed. Mr. Wallace's eyes widened as he saw the back of Emma's shirt was stained with small patches of blood, as if from a fresh wound or reopened cuts. Horror filled Mr. Wallace's stomach. He immediately crouched, trying to speak calmly. What happened, sweetie? Are you hurt? Emma just shivered, her breath catching. After a tense moment, she spoke in a trembling whisper. If I sit all day, it means I'm lazy. She swallowed hard. She says, lazy kids get the stool. Confusion swirled in Mr. Wallace's mind. Stool? What do you mean, Emma? The girl nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. There's a wooden stool at home. If I move too much, it leaves marks. She swallowed, stifling a sob. She hit me for not standing straight. Mr. Wallace felt a cold wave of anger swirl inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm for the girl's sake. He gently helped Emma to her feet, careful not to touch the sore spots. The girl winced but allowed Mr. Wallace to guide her to the sink. We'll get you patched up, Mr. Wallace said in a soothing tone. I need to let someone know about this. We can't just ignore it. Emma's eyes flared with panic. No. She'll find out, she stammered, voice trembling. Mr. Wallace placed a reassuring hand near the girl's shoulder, not quite touching her. It's not right for her to hurt you like this. We'll make sure you're safe. The fear in Emma's eyes was heartbreaking. That afternoon, Mr. Wallace drafted a detailed incident report describing Emma's injuries, the reference to being forced to stand, the mention of a stool that left marks. He attached a photo he took discreetly of the blood on the back of Emma's shirt. He hated photographing a child in distress, but he felt it might be the only solid evidence he could provide. Then he brought these to the school administration. He was not a teacher, but he hoped they'd see how serious the situation was. The vice principal, Miss Carver, read the statement with a concerned frown. She promised she'd forward it to the district child welfare liaison. Mr. Wallace left her office feeling anxious but slightly hopeful. At least now there was documentation. 2 days passed and no immediate action was visible. On the third day, Miss Carver pulled him aside to deliver the official response. No visible injuries observed during home visit. Child denies fear. Guardian is cooperative. No further action recommended. The words made Mr. Wallace's blood boil. He demanded to know how there could be no visible injuries, given the blood-stained shirt. Miss Carver shrugged helplessly. The claim is that the shirt was an older stain. The child apparently said she fell playing outside. There's no direct proof of abuse, and the guardian has no history of violence. The message was painfully clear. The system was taking the guardian's word over a child's, or a janitor's. That night, Mr. Wallace sat in his cramped apartment, flipping through his notes, reading again the lines about the stool and bruises. He recalled how the nurse's earlier concern had been dismissed in a similar manner. It felt like someone was burying the reports before they gained attention. He was furious but also uncertain how to proceed. He wasn't a mandated reporter, and the official channels had failed. Still, he couldn't let it go. He thought of Emma trembling in that bathroom stall, of the quiet terror in her voice. Mr. Wallace decided that if the system wouldn't look deeper, maybe he needed to gather more evidence on his own, evidence that no one could ignore. He devised a plan. The school had a front drop-off zone where parents or guardians picked up and dropped off kids each day. There was a small supply closet near the building's entrance, typically used for storing extra cleaning supplies, and a rolling trash bin. From that supply closet's narrow window, one could see the curb where cars lined up. Mr. Wallace thought if he placed a discrete motion-activated camera in that window, he might catch glimpses of how Emma was treated at drop-off. It was a risky move, probably not strictly allowed, but he reasoned that if a child was being harmed, that was more important than worries about privacy. The next morning he installed a small camera, the kind he'd once used for home security in his old garage. He angled it so it captured the corner of the curb near the sign labeled, "Pickup/drop only." He didn't mention this to anyone, not even the nurse. Days went by without any revealing footage. Emma still arrived wearing the same anxious expression, the same rigid posture. She rarely spoke to the woman who dropped her off, a tall figure with sharp features, presumably Kara. Mr. Wallace reviewed the camera's recordings each evening, but mostly he saw Emma stepping out of the car, then quickly walking up the sidewalk. No physical confrontation was visible. He worried that maybe the real abuse happened behind closed doors in the home. Then, almost a week after he set up the camera, he found what he needed. It was early one morning. The sky was still streaked with dawn when Kara's car pulled up. The camera's timestamp read 7:11 a.m. Emma got out slowly, as though each movement hurt. Then the tall woman lunged forward, yanking the backpack off Emma's shoulders. The force jerked the girl's head back. Mr. Wallace watched in horror as Kara delivered a sharp slap to the back of Emma's head, making her stagger. The blow wasn't visible from every angle, but the camera caught enough. Emma looked dazed, stepping forward with shaky steps. Then Kara shoved the backpack at her. The woman's face was partially turned away from the lens, but the aggression was unmistakable. Emma and Kara exchanged words, though the camera had no audio. The child's face was filled with fear. The confrontation lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to confirm that physical abuse was happening. Mr. Wallace's heart pounded as he rewatched the clip. This was clear proof that the child's injuries weren't imaginary. He transferred the file to a USB drive, making sure to keep a backup. He considered turning it over to the school again, but he feared another cover-up or bureaucratic runaround. He remembered the nurse's comment about the system being broken. He needed someone who would act immediately. That was when he thought of his sister Diana. She wasn't law enforcement, but she was a dedicated juvenile court advocate in a neighboring county. She understood child protection laws better than anyone he knew. That same evening he drove an hour to see her, not wanting to risk sending the footage electronically. He explained everything: Emma's bruises, the suspicious dismissal of previous reports, the stool punishments. Diana listened with her jaw tight, furious tears in her eyes. She took the USB, promising to share it with a trusted contact in Child Protective Services. "We'll make sure it doesn't get brushed aside," she said firmly. Mr. Wallace felt a surge of relief. At least now an independent advocate would push for an investigation. He left her place feeling more hopeful than he had in weeks. What neither of them fully realized was how deep the protective shield around Kara ran. Diana's contact discovered that the sister-in-law of Kara was working in the regional intake office. She had apparently flagged prior complaints about Kara's foster placements as unsubstantiated, enabling them to be closed quickly. 3 other children had gone through Kara's home in the past 5 years. Each one ended up labeled defiant or manipulative, then removed to another foster arrangement for non-compliance. None of those cases had triggered official scrutiny because the injuries or negative behavior reports were blamed on the children themselves. Mr. Wallace felt physically ill when he learned that this had happened multiple times. It was an organized pattern of turning a blind eye, ensuring that no one looked too closely at Kara's methods. But the footage Mr. Wallace had captured was undeniable. Even if the sister-in-law tried to bury the complaint, the video existed as stark visual proof. Under pressure from Diana's associates and an internal audit, the county finally took action. Within 72 hours, a new caseworker was assigned, and a police officer accompanied them to Kara's home for a thorough inspection. This time, no superficial excuses or rushed denials were accepted. Emma was removed from the house that day, her face a blend of relief and terror as she stepped into the caseworker's car. Mr. Wallace wished he could have been there to offer reassurance, but he had no direct role in that process. He could only wait for news. The next morning, news of the removal rippled through Highland Oaks Elementary. Whispers among teachers reached Mr. Wallace. Emma was out of that home, but an even more distressing complication arose. The foster system was overcrowded. No open beds were available in the immediate area, and the label on Emma's file, defiant, manipulative, high behavioral concerns, made prospective foster parents wary. Many children in the system faced these difficulties, especially older kids with any mention of aggression or anxiety. Mr. Wallace felt a surge of frustration. The system had allowed her to suffer, and now, even in rescue, it left her in limbo. Mr. Wallace wrestled with an idea that felt both outrageous and inevitable, applying to be Emma's foster caretaker himself. He was single with a modest income, living in a small one-bedroom apartment. He had never considered fostering a child. But the girl had trusted him in that bathroom, and Mr. Wallace felt responsible, as though fate had placed him in Emma's path for exactly this reason. After hours of soul-searching, he approached the caseworker and tentatively offered to open his home to Emma if it meant the girl wouldn't bounce into another damaging environment. She was initially surprised. He explained he had no prior fostering experience, but he had a stable job, references, and no criminal record. He had been quietly saving money for years. The caseworker didn't dismiss him outright. Perhaps she sensed his sincerity. She told him the process required emergency approval, background checks, and a home visit, but given the shortage of foster placements, it was possible. Over the next several days, Mr. Wallace navigated a whirlwind of paperwork, interviews, and nervous waiting. He called in favors from a teacher friend who had always admired his calm presence. He asked the school nurse to vouch for him. He tidied his small apartment from top to bottom, buying a second-hand bed frame to convert his living room area into a makeshift bedroom. He felt daunted by the emotional weight of caring for a traumatized child. But every time doubts crept in, he recalled Emma's trembling voice in the bathroom, confessing about the stool that left marks. That memory strengthened his resolve. Finally, late one afternoon, the caseworker informed him that the emergency approval had gone through, contingent on a more thorough check down the line. They would bring Emma to him that evening. Mr. Wallace's heart thundered in his chest. He felt relief, excitement, and fear all at once. He had prepared a small dinner, found some plates and cups that might appeal to a child, and put out fresh sheets. Even as he bustled around, doubt nibbled at his mind. Could he really handle the emotional needs of a girl so obviously scarred? Would Emma trust him? Would it be enough to keep the child safe? He didn't have time to dwell on these questions for long. A plain sedan pulled up outside his apartment building just after dusk. The caseworker emerged, followed by Emma. Even under the glow of the street lamp, Mr. Wallace could see how pale the girl looked, how her posture was stiff with apprehension. Mr. Wallace stepped onto the front stoop, trying to project calm. Emma clutched a worn backpack. She didn't speak until they reached Mr. Wallace's door. Then, as the caseworker lingered by the car giving them space, Emma turned to Mr. Wallace and said in a tiny, trembling voice, "Are you sure I can stay? I don't want to get in trouble if I sit." Mr. Wallace felt tears prick his eyes. "You're not going to be in trouble," he said gently, guiding Emma inside. "Not here." The next morning he took Emma to school, not as a lone janitor crossing paths with a trembling student, but as her foster caretaker. The staff took note, some raising eyebrows in surprise, others offering quiet encouragement. There was no major announcement or fanfare, just hushed recognition that Mr. Wallace had stepped forward in a time of crisis. For Emma's part, she seemed unsure how to act, glancing at Mr. Wallace with confusion, perhaps waiting for a scolding that never came. On the practical side, a wave of complications arose. Mr. Wallace had to adjust his work schedule to ensure Emma had supervision. The principal allowed some flexibility, letting him come in earlier to finish major cleaning tasks so he could oversee Emma after school ended. Teachers, noticing the shift, seemed to grow more sympathetic to Emma. Some even apologized for labeling her defiant. But the school bureaucracy moved slowly. The real victory was that Emma no longer arrived with that dreaded tension in her shoulders. Bit by bit, Mr. Wallace watched the girl's posture relax. The first time he saw Emma calmly lower herself onto a cafeteria bench, albeit gingerly, he felt an odd surge of joy. The girl looked around as if expecting a blow, but none came. Mr. Wallace realized how foreign the concept of simply sitting must have been for Emma under Kara's rule. Yet the shadows of abuse didn't vanish overnight. Emma sometimes jerked awake from nightmares or froze if Mr. Wallace accidentally moved too quickly around her. There were still formalities to manage. The child protective case was ongoing, with Kara facing potential charges for assault, especially after the video footage and previous complaints were re-evaluated. The issue with the sister-in-law's involvement also loomed. Rumors suggested that further investigations might expose a chain of neglect within the local foster system. Mr. Wallace tried not to dwell on that, focusing instead on creating a stable environment for Emma. He cooked simple meals, showed her how to do small chores without fear of punishment, and let her watch cartoons in the evening if her homework was done. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, an entirely new experience for a girl who had lived in dread of sitting still. At school, staff who once wrote off Emma as uncooperative began to notice small changes. She would glance up occasionally when someone addressed her, and she sometimes spoke in short sentences rather than whispered replies. Her teacher, Miss Downing, told Mr. Wallace that Emma seemed more willing to engage in class discussions, though she still tensed if asked to remain seated for too long. The nurse reported that some of her bruises had healed, and new ones weren't appearing. Meanwhile, Kara was trying to appeal the removal, claiming Emma was mentally unstable and had made up stories. Mr. Wallace braced himself for a potential legal battle, worried that Kara's connections might still have influence. The fear that Emma might be forced back into that environment made his stomach churn. Diana assured him that the evidence was overwhelming, especially the footage of the slap. She also believed the uncovered scandal regarding the sister-in-law would discredit Kara's claims. Still, the wheels of bureaucracy could spin in unpredictable ways. One day, after the final bell rang, Mr. Wallace was gathering his janitorial cart to wipe down a messy art room when he found Emma waiting for him in the corridor. The girl clutched a piece of paper colored with crayons. She hesitated, then extended it. Mr. Wallace took it gingerly, unsure what to expect. It was a drawing of a tall stool painted in blues and greens, with no menacing edges that might leave marks. Beneath it, Emma had scribbled, "This is a safe stool. No hurting." Mr. Wallace blinked, feeling a lump in his throat. He nodded slowly. "Thank you for sharing this, sweetie. You want to explain it to me?" Emma shrugged, eyes downcast. "If you have a stool, it shouldn't be for hurting. It should just be for sitting," she murmured. Mr. Wallace placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "I agree. I won't let anything happen to you like that again." The girl nodded, a tiny spark of trust in her gaze. The climactic moment came on a Wednesday, after Mr. Wallace had cleaned up a major water spill in the lunchroom. He stepped into the main office to find Miss Carver, the vice principal, beckoning him over. She wore a relieved expression. "They've closed the case," she said in a hushed tone. "Kara lost her appeal. The charges are official. Emma's not going anywhere." Mr. Wallace closed his eyes briefly, exhaling a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The sense of relief was overwhelming. He pictured Emma's anxious face and the specter of the stool. Now the girl could heal without that looming threat. Miss Carver clasped Mr. Wallace's shoulder. "I just wanted to say thank you," she murmured. "You went above and beyond." The rest of the day felt surreal. Mr. Wallace saw Emma in the hallway after class, rummaging in her cubby. He walked up, heart thumping with quiet joy. The girl looked up warily, then noticed Mr. Wallace's gentle smile. "They said I can stay," Emma whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. Mr. Wallace nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He rested a hand lightly on the girl's back, mindful not to startle her. "That's right," he said. "We're heading home in a bit. And hey, if you feel like sitting on the couch tonight, you can do that as long as you want." A shaky, hesitant smile crossed Emma's face. She didn't speak, but the relief in her eyes was enough. And that evening, as Mr. Wallace locked up the school and guided Emma out the front doors, he felt the weight of months of worry lift. He realized the child who once refused to sit was finally free to rest without fear. The hallway lights dimmed behind them, and the glass doors reflected Emma's small frame next to the quiet janitor who had noticed what no one else had. They walked together into the dusky parking lot, side by side, A strange but steadfast duo. Emma paused at the car, turning to look at Mr. Wallace. The girl asked softly, "Can we watch a movie tonight?" "I'll sit on the couch." Mr. Wallace's voice caught. "Yes, sweetie," he said thickly. "We absolutely can."